Janelle, thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Yeah, no, I'm super excited to speak with you because I'm a huge fan of all of your work. I think I actually had notifications on your tweets for a very long.
I'm honored. It's always weird because, you put out content and you don't know who's listening and who's enjoying it. So thank you. I appreciate that.
So today we're going to be jumping into what a learner-centered course is, which I'm personally very excited to be learning about. But before we get into that, can we talk a little bit about what the biggest problems you see in the course industry are right now?
Yeah, first I have to say the course industry, especially for entrepreneurs, has completely just exploded. I remember when it was first starting out, really around 2013, 14, it was still super early. Very few people were doing courses. And now it feels like everyone has a course. But I think to answer your question, some of the challenges are the same. And that is one of the biggest ones I see is people want to go straight to having a course and they haven't yet sold anything. They haven't offered a service. They don't really know they don't have an audience. And if they do, they're not engaging their audience, but they have this idea of just, I'm going to create this course and everything is going to work perfectly. And I'm going to see all of these sales. And it's a lot more to it than that, as I'm sure you know. So that would probably be the biggest challenge I see coming from people, particularly new course creators.
That kind of makes me wonder because I think I see a lot of marketing in this industry from, I mean, both course platforms and from business coaches in general. It's the courses are the go-to way for people to scale their business right now.
Mm.
So, do you think everybody should create a course? There's this mindset that everybody has a course in them, which I
Yeah.
find a little bit strange, but I'd love your thoughts on that.
I don't think courses are for everyone. It's not that everyone can't. Like, if there's something that you are an expert on and you are able to package that up, could you create a course? Absolutely. Should you create a course? That's the question. I think that one of the things we were talking about, Claire Pelletreau, who, is a mutual friend and acquaintance of ours. I remember I interviewed Claire and she said something super intriguing for me, which was she really at one point had to sit down and think about how she was building her business and did the structure of her business work for her life. And it's the same thing with creating a course. Is your life and business set up to support that? Are you set up to support the students who are going to take your course and the questions that they're going to have and the updates that it's going to take? It's not just a set it and forget it type thing. So those are some considerations that I don't really see anyone talking about. And sometimes people create a course and they realize there's a lot more to it, especially if you give a damn, right? So yeah.
It's not the ultimate path towards passive income that people tell you it
Not at
is.
all. Not at all.
Okay, so let's get into what learner-centered courses are. So what are they and how are they different from sort of more teaching-centered courses, which
Mm.
when I Googled the term is what came up.
Yeah. So the big difference is that a learner-centered course is going to be based on you're creating it based on what your audience wants. As opposed to what a lot of people do when they create a course is they sit down and they think about, okay, this is what I want to create a course on. This is what I think should go into the course. This is how I want to outline it. This is what I want to teach. It's all right? And there's no input from your learner. And it actually makes it harder for you because you're trying to guess what it should look like. And I get so many people who say, well, I don't know what my outline should include. I don't know what I should be teaching. I don't know this. And the solution is in the problem. It's because you're focused on you. So a learner-centered course flips that on its head and it makes everything easier. All it requires is you engaging with your audience, finding out, what about your particular topic is challenging. What questions do they have? What do they want to learn? And most importantly, what result do they want? What's the desired transformation that they're looking for? And if you do this the right way, you can get your outline from very specific questions that you ask. You'll start to see the actual outline of your course. And it just makes everything easier. And then also the other part to it is just getting your audience involved in the creation, which means in my case, I always tell my students to teach it live. And so it's just really getting your learners involved as part of the process and building something to their needs, almost building to order, as opposed to trying to come up with this magical idea, right?
So you mentioned that there's a right way of doing this. So it sounds like the first step is market research and getting to know your audience, but what happens next?
Yes, so you're right. The first step is definitely to do some research. So I always recommend two different parts of research or two different methods of research: surveys and then customer interviews. So you can get that qualitative color that the surveys don't always give you. And then after you do that, the next step is to analyze those results. And you can see, especially if you ask people, what do you want to learn about X, or what is your desired result? And certain questions that I ask in surveys, you analyze your results and you'll be able to see what the patterns are. And you'll also be able to see what are the lessons that you need to teach. So from there, I usually help people to analyze the results and then formulate their course outline based on what people have said they're struggling with. So after you do that, then I like to tell my students, don't try to create all of your content. You don't need to create 100% of your content. Just create a percentage of it. But before you even create, start using that language that you got from your learners when they did the survey, when they did the interview, to create your marketing materials. Set up a landing page. You're going to get so much language and everything. You know this, you're a writer. So it's a secret, but it's so obvious. You're going to get everything that you need for your copy. So set up your landing page, map out your emails that you're going to use, and pre-sell your course. So that's the next step after you have your outline that I always advise my students to take. And, you will have to build in some time to create some content. I usually tell people to have about 30% so that you give yourself a little bit of a runway when you teach it live. But you don't want to have 100% of it complete, because when you teach it live, this is the beautiful part of having a learner-centered course and doing a live pilot, is you're going to learn so much. You're going to find out where the learning gaps are, which are, the space between what you thought people were going to learn and what they actually learned. And you're going to say, oh, I didn't think about, this, or I didn't realize people would get stuck here, or they would need more support there. So teach it live, figure out, what tweaks you need to make, and then go and create your self-paced course.
Okay, so just to recap really quickly, you do your initial market research, you survey your audience, you do your client interviews, and then you create your outline, then you pre-sell. And as you're pre-selling, you're also creating like the first, I don't know how many ever modules of your course, and then you create the rest once, you're actually teaching live, and then incorporating their feedback into it, identifying, I think you said learning gaps, and then going from there. Okay. So what do you do if you don't actually have that audience in the first place? Should you be creating a course if you don't have an audience?
I used to say no to this question. I used to get this question all the time. I would say, no, absolutely not. Focus on creating your audience, building your audience up. However, I now have a different answer, because I met people who created their course first and they put it on a marketplace. And they used that marketplace like Udemy to validate whether or not their course idea was going to sell, and to gradually build an audience, which is a little challenging because you have to get people away from Udemy over to your site, but there are ways to do it. So you can, there's models for if you don't have an audience, there's models for doing something different. However, I think for, probably 90 to 95% of us, focus on building an audience first, because if you're going to do those surveys, if you're going to do those interviews, you just need people to sell to, right? So ultimately, that's where you're going to get the biggest ROI.
I love that. And I'm going to shamelessly plug Terrain in here as well, because we are
Yeah.
marketplace too.
I'm sorry.
And
I'm like, crap.
I love that because one of the reasons we started is because we saw people who have this deep expertise but don't necessarily have an audience, and it was frustrating to see them kind of struggle to get the word out. And yeah, I mean, marketplaces are a great place to start out because and again, plug Terrain in here, you actually get access to all of their emails, so you can plug them into your email marketing software, and then you can build that connection on your own. But there are lots of other options out there for people right now, and you don't necessarily have to spend years building an audience, because that's also a lot harder to do now than it was 5 or 10 years ago. So that's super interesting.
Yeah, I think it's most important to get started. Everything I've said is true, but I always tell people, look, do what gets done. If you have an aversion to building an audience and you just have things that get you stuck there and you just can't overcome that, and you want to create the course first, do it. Put it on a marketplace like Terrain and, go for it. Do what gets done. Keep the momentum, keep the movement.
So one of the things that we get asked a lot by people who want to create courses for the first time is there a certain length you should aim to hit with your first course? Should you aim to go like surface level in general, or go really deep with your first course?
I get that question a lot as well. And I usually say base it on that research. So if you've surveyed your audience, or, even if you have so another way you can research is by doing what I call kind of e-stalking or recon, whatever, if you don't want to be a stalker, you can just use whichever term, but identifying problems and kind of using that to create your outline. And I say that your outline is going to help you determine how deep to go. It's one of those things where you just have to teach it, and you'll start to realize the depth and the breadth that you need to take. So that's why I recommend teaching live, because when you have that initial outline and you'll think, okay, this is great, this is the amount of content that I need, and then you'll realize, oh, I should probably create a module on this. So it's a tricky question to answer, and the only true way to know is to teach the first version.
Yeah, and I think that makes a lot of sense. My question now comes, this is another question we get pretty often, is about pricing. So how would you price like a beginner's level course differently from an experienced, more deep course? And if you don't know that going into it, how would you decide pricing?
Pricing is tricky, and it's another one that everyone wants this magical answer to. I wouldn't price based on the level. I would price based on the value. And so I typically stay away from single prices. I usually do tiered pricing. However, I would say, if you are doing a first version of a course, then I definitely would make that first version a little bit on the lower end of what maybe you ultimately want the course to be, because it's the first run. Especially if you're doing a beta run, definitely have a discounted version. But differentiating based on level, I don't think I would necessarily do that.
Interesting, because I think I almost wonder if it's like a remnant from like James Wedmore's ascension model, where you eventually start people off with like a $99 course and eventually push them towards some $25,000 mastermind. So I wonder if that's where that mindset really comes from.
Well, I think that's the same as pricing based on value. So, for example, I have a self-paced course that helps people start an email list. And it's a $100 course. I'm not going to charge $2,000 for that, but my group program for people to create a course, and I teach them everything I know about creating a course and, everything that we've just talked about and more, that is $2,000,
Right.
and there's tiers, but on the high end is 2,000. So, but that's based on value, right? And so I think that's what it really comes down to. The model that you just explained, that's, I'm sure we all know, like the value ladder model, Richard Brunson, that's going to be super valuable for that particular segment that has those, $25,000 to spend. And they know that that investment is probably going to get their money back and then some. So you have to take into consideration the value. That's what you want to anchor it on. If you're teaching something that is going to make people money, especially, and you can put a number on, if they follow the process, they're going to be able to make this, that helps you to set your price. It, at the very least, is going to help you determine whether you have, a 2-digit or 3-digit or 4 or 5-digit course.
Yeah, and I love that. And I think that if you are going to be charging something in the $25,000 sort of range, you have to have actual case studies and proven ROI, because no one's really going to buy at that price point unless you can kind of justify that price.
Yeah.
And another thing that's like thrown around in the online business space a lot is the charge what you're worth argument, and drives me nuts.
Yeah, I don't like it either. Yeah.
Yeah, and so charge what your course is worth and the value you bring to the table.
I understand where it comes from, because we typically, especially women, sadly, we typically undercharge. I see it all the time. So I understand where it comes from, and in fact, I tell people, especially women, whatever that initial number is, increase it by 25%. Like, at least.
Yeah.
Whatever you're
Oh,
thinking.
100%. Yeah.
So I get it. I definitely get it. But, I guess the takeaway, or the last thing I would say when it comes to pricing, is one thing that people, going back to that value ladder model, people don't think enough about the ladder of products that they're offering. So it does kind of go back to what you said about having a beginner level course, but it's more so when people first engage with you, and what is that first challenge that they're having before they can, get. So think about what's the beginner, what's the next level challenge, what's the highest engagement that they can have with you, and what are the products that meet those. And the one at the beginning does need to be lower in price than the one here and the one here. So that's the part that people don't always think about, is their product ladder and the price points along that. A lot of people come out the gate and they want to create this, $2,000, $3,000, $5,000, $10,000 course, but they don't really. Your audience has segments, and you need to have, an offer that is a solution for each segment in your audience.
I love that. So it's almost like you're aligning the customer journey with their growth journey with your product ladder, and making sure you have something for each of those stages. Super smart.
Exactly.
Yeah,
Exactly.
I love that. So I think so whenever we do launches for people in like traditional product launches and things like that, one of the things that we always tell them is to have some kind of a feedback loop with people who are going through the process. And what that does is it helps with optimization, so you can have better messaging the next time around. Is there some kind of process similar to this that you'd recommend for course creators to keep improving on each iteration of the course?
So one of the things I do for my marketing clients is we do a buyer and a non-buyer survey. So, typically my marketing clients come to me when they're just tired of manual launches and they want to put their course on an evergreen funnel. And we find out, I love sending out those surveys because it allows us to find out, why did people buy? What was the motivation? But it also gives us an opportunity to get feedback. So that's one way that you can do it. If you're wanting to find out why people bought and what are some things that maybe the buyers would have liked you to include. Another thing you could do is a course evaluation survey. Just if you just want to know about the course and the quality of the course, you can definitely do that. I have found that can be tricky because people don't always finish the courses. And if we put those evaluation surveys at the end, it's like,
Yeah.
is anyone going to see this? So those can be tricky. So I think that buyer surveys are one way to really get a sense of if people were confused about your launch, if people, had any questions about the course materials, if there's something that they wish you had included that you didn't include. And then non-buyer surveys are great because they give you an insight to objections that kept people away. So those are some ways to get some feedback for your launch, and you can kind of sneak in some questions about the course as well.
Okay, I love it. So just to recap really quickly for everybody, you start your first stage of creating your learner-centered course is doing the market research, and then you send out surveys, you interview your clients and customers, and you put together an outline based on that. Then you start using that messaging to set up your marketing collateral, and then you pre-sell. As you're pre-selling, you're creating your content for your first couple of modules, which you're going to then teach live. And as you're doing that, you're incorporating feedback from everybody and planning out and executing on the rest of your modules. And soon after your launch, you are going to be sending out buyer surveys and non-buyer surveys, and then just gathering information for future.
No, that's it. That's it. And I just want to emphasize the importance. I think that non-buyer survey is almost more important than the buyer survey because it's going to help you find the objections, the things that held people back, things that maybe you need to explain or answer better in your copy.
Yeah, I love that. And for our clients as well, that's something that we always recommend because, and the objection we get from our clients about sending out non-buyer surveys is they're always going to say it's the price, but that's a really good indication that you haven't done a good job communicating value.
Yep.
And there's so much you can get out of those surveys, and those are absolute gold. And regardless of where you're launching, you absolutely should be sending out this.
Yeah. And most times I found you're absolutely right. It's never about price. It's about value. And but sometimes I shouldn't say that because I actually think that that's elitist. Sometimes it is about price. It frankly is. Sure. And so, we need to know that, but you need to figure out what was the thing that kept people back. Is it, it's usually price, time, or just uncertainty, not being super clear about what you're offering.
And honestly, if you've done your research well and you understand your audience, you have to be also looking for ability. Like, do they have the ability to pay at this price point? And do they have the ability to show up and get the most out of this course? Because so many times I see these courses that are marketed to busy moms and they have mandatory office hours 3 times a week for an hour. And it's just, that's not going to work.
Yeah.
So that's the opposite of a learner-centered course, I would say.
It's just knowing your audience. I think that's the beauty of all of this. I've pivoted from doing consulting for instructional design consulting to marketing consulting for course creators, but a lot of it is very intertwined. It all comes down to knowing who you're serving. And, if you find out that price is a thing and you start seeing that a lot, it's really an opportunity for you to create, a lower scope, lower price product. So it's just, you get to know your audience through all of this. And so many times we focus on the failure and not the learning.
Yep. I love that. Any parting words for everybody?
I just think, online courses are still relatively young. There's still room for you to be present. However, the customer base, the world is getting smarter and savvier, and they are understanding that they want quality. So if this is something that you're going to venture into, definitely do it, but do it with a focus on creating a learner-centered course that you can really deliver results that your audience wants to achieve.
I love that. Janelle, thank you so much. For everybody listening in, Janelle's blog is the greatest resource in the world on all of this. I have 35 tabs open just from reading everything on there. But for folks who want to connect with you and learn more about you, where should they go besides your blog?
Yeah, so my website is janelleallen.com. I am on Twitter at Janelle Allen, and then I am sparingly on Instagram, janelleallen.com. But Twitter, or hop on my newsletter, just go to janelleallen.com and subscribe right there on the homepage. Oh, and don't forget, I just launched a YouTube channel this year, and you can find me on YouTube at Janelle Allen Online.